Does Donald Trump have skin cancer or pre-skin cancer on his neck? Let's take a look. Now, I think you know that I am not a doctor, though my father was, which does not give me any skill set to diagnose cancer. But when you look at this photo here, there are many people who have commented that the redness you see on his neck may be due to a topical treatment to either manage early skin cancer or prevent. Now, Donald Trump's own doctor, when asked, said that he was applying topical skin cream. He didn't say as a preventative measure. So he didn't say what was being prevented. However, this does, from people who seem to know and have used this before, it looks a lot like a treatment called fluorouracil, or Effudex is the brand name for this. And there are people who have put up photos of kind of before and after this treatment. And this is the, whatever this cream is that he's put like on his neck has this effect, right? Would turn his skin red. Now, it's problematic to me that Donald Trump has never been forthright about his health condition. But what we also don't know is where else he might have skin cancer if he does, and how much it has spread, right? There's different types of skin cancer. Some is very curable, right? This is a guy who spends his life on a golf course, so it's understandable why it might be there. But, I have questions, and they don't seem to ever answer them. Now, speaking of being untruthful, can we talk about the ever shifting justifications and rationales for this attack on Iran, which is now spiraling out of control, as you know, with the United States right now saying that Americans need to leave a variety of assorted countries in the Middle East, even as it's kind of impossible for folks to get out of those countries. More on that in a minute. I want to share with you the ever-shifting justifications for this war and the continual lies claiming this is not a war. It's kind of crazy. So I'm going to share with you this montage CNN put together. It's quite helpful, but there's even more. Let's play it.
You may have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
They can't even get their story straight. Now, Donald Trump, President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, what they have renamed Department of War, say it's a war. Some of these other people are trying to say it's not. Maybe they got the talking points that are different from the reality as seen through the eyes of Donald Trump. Now, the other thing that keeps shifting isn't just whether this is a war or just something else, right? Some other kind of attack, is the justification, right? And we have heard everything from, well, they were a week away from creating a nuclear weapon about Iran. Or we've heard that they had nuclear ambitions, or it goes on and on, all these threats, right? That they wouldn't negotiate, so we had no choice. But the latest crazy explanation, and by the way, it's really important for Trump and his backers to claim that this was imminent, that an attack from Iran was imminent, right? But we have the Wall Street Journal reporting, not exactly the bastion of lefty perspectives here, reporting that, and I'm quoting their headline, Trump's case for war with Iran faces growing scrutiny. And the subhead says U.S. intelligence showed threats from Iran loomed as they had for years, but they were not imminent. There was nothing urgent. And so, and I'm going to get to Rubio's crazy explanation, right? So we know that the officials in the United States, including up to Donald Trump, had access to classified information, folks, that made clear that there was no imminent threat, right? And we have folks from George W. Bush's White House, a guy named Michael Singh, who handled the Middle East under George W. Bush. And this is what he told the Wall Street Journal. He said that the Trump administration has, quote, been inconsistent and often inaccurate in explaining why we are at war, what we are trying to achieve, and how we intend to achieve it, right? So, yeah, we've got a problem here. They're trying to say that an attack from Iran was imminent. Not true. Two, they're trying to say they have objectives to achieve. They don't seem to have any. And finally, they claim that they have a good plan and capable people executing that plan. None of that appears to be true. So let me share with you the absolutely Alice in Wonderland backwards logic that Marco Rubio came up with yesterday at a press conference and has now been parroted by Mike Johnson. Okay, so listen to this, and we'll talk about this on the other side. It's insane.
Does Congress have to weigh in? Is the president declaring war, and does Congress have to weigh in? And was there an imminent threat? Did you tell lawmakers that there was an imminent
There
threat?
absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
Excuse me, but what the actual fuck is that? I just want to repeat to you his justification and break it down for you. Why it's so audaciously bullshit, I can't even begin to tell you. Okay. Rubio is saying that because Israel, Netanyahu, had a plan to bomb Iran, that Trump knew that if Israel bombed Iran, then Iran would retaliate against our bases and our military apparatus. And that if that happened, he's claiming, they would be brought before Congress asking why you weren't prepared for this. So he said, we had no choice but to attack Iran before they got to us. Now, the reason why this sounds illogical and crazy to you is because it's illogical and crazy. And it's even worse than it seems on the surface, because on the surface, it seems like they're saying, my friend was going to punch the guy sitting next to him at Starbucks. And I knew that if my friend punched the guy sitting next to him at Starbucks, the guy was going to come swinging at me. So I came over and punched that stranger first and called that imminent, right? That is backwards logic. But again, it's even worse than that. Because here's the deal. When it comes to Israel attacking Iran, as if they do that independently, Netanyahu went to Donald Trump. He has been wanting to do this for years, right? And let's be clear, Donald Trump gave him the go-ahead. Plus, where do you think Israel's military budget comes from, right? Israel has huge amounts of money in defense and offensive spending, right? And do you think that if Netanyahu wanted to attack Iran and Donald Trump didn't want him to do that, don't you think he could say, we're not going to give you any more money? And he could announce that, right? We provide the United States, I believe it is something over $3 billion a year, maybe even close to 4. Since October 7th, the attack on Israel, terrible, awful. Hamas, awful. And yet this war that has gone on has been unacceptable and brutal and inhumane and a war crime, right, against Gaza. And of course, we have the West Bank too. Separate issue, same problem with Netanyahu. Okay. We have, the United States, given Israel over $21 billion in aid. So for Rubio to say that, Israel was going to do it, we knew Iran would attack us, that is utter bullshit. Is Donald Trump so weak? And maybe the answer is yes, that he can't tell Israel no, right? He could. He could say no fucking more money for you. He could get on television and do that. Part of it, okay, he's weak because there's AIPAC, the lobbying organization. There's also other reasons why Donald Trump might be weak. Remember, you don't think Israeli intelligence and Russian intelligence has as much information as our FBI and DOJ does about allegations of Trump raping that 13 to 15-year-old girl, and that is just one of the allegations. Okay, so whatever it is, because he's compromised, because he wanted to attack Iran, Donald Trump in the administration, Rubio is trying to blame Israel here. We fund Israel. So when you say Israel, Netanyahu is going to bomb Iran, and what the fuck could we do? I guess we have to bomb too, otherwise Iran's going to attack us, is just a smokescreen. We coordinated with Israel this attack. It wouldn't have happened without our money and Donald Trump's sanction. This was nothing imminent. This was a war of choice. And to say we had to attack another country because we knew that if we are the nation we funded, so we fund a country who's going to attack Iran. We tell them, go ahead and do that. And then we say, well, we're going to join in on that because otherwise we'll be attacked, is not an imminent threat. This is such bullshit. Okay, I think I have stated this. I think you know this, but the more I say it, the angrier it makes me. Now, on top of it, if you think that was bad, Secretary of State Rubio, when asked about a war powers resolution vote, he had this to say. And let's just back up and say a couple things. It's pretty confusing how this all works, but in theory, in the US Constitution, right, it's Congress who has to vote on declaration of war. And Congress, though, because of that, enacted some legislation called the War Powers Resolution. And under this statute, it says that if a president does engage in armed conflict, the president has 48 hours to notify Congress. And if they don't get congressional authorization for use of force, they have to withdraw within 60 to 90 days. And this was enacted in 1973 in response to, this war in Vietnam that was never declared as a war. And I'm kind of simplifying. There are more things that go on here in terms of the War Powers Resolution and how this operates, and the authorization of military force after 9/11. There's a lot of stuff, and I am not an expert in war law, right? There are experts in different types of law, but I just want to give you the fundamentals so you know what Rubio is talking about, right? There is going to be a vote today, I don't know if it passes, concerning this to try to stop Trump from doing what he's doing. So let's listen to Rubio on the War Powers Act.
Have said that they should have a role, they should be able to weigh in here, and there are going to be war powers resolutions votes in Congress later this week. Why not notify Congress ahead of this, and does Congress...
Well, we did. We notified Congress. I mean, we notified the Gang of Eight. We notified congressional leadership. There's no law that requires us to do that. The law says we have to notify them 48 hours after beginning hostilities. We've done that. I think the notification went today. But we did notify members of Congress in advance. But we can't notify 535 members of Congress.
Vote to authorize the war.
Well, the Congress can vote on whatever they want, but there's no law that requires us to do that. And I want to say something, because I see people on TV. Look, that's fine. If they want to take a war powers vote, they can do that. They've done that. They've done that a bunch of times. But people keep saying that there's no law that requires the president to have done anything with regards to this. To begin with, no presidential administration has ever accepted the War Powers Act as constitutional. Not Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents. That said, we have followed the notification at 48 hours. We're here today. I've done more Gang of Eight briefings than I got in the 4 years that Biden was president and I was a member of the Gang of Eight. All of that said, we've complied with the law 100%. And we're going to continue to comply with it. We've done the notification, and we officially to Congress, but we did notify members of Congress. We just can't notify 535 people. That's not possible, but we did the Gang of Eight twice. I briefed them last week, and then I called them the night before the operation.
Can you tell us what you know this is?
Okay. You hear what he said. He's saying that no president thinks the War Powers Resolution Act is constitutional. Okay, interesting. Now, even if something passes in Congress today, it will be overridden by Donald Trump's veto unless they have a veto-proof majority, which it doesn't look like they have. So even though Donald Trump is engaged in an unlawful war, and even though Congress has the power to stop him, right now, they won't use that power, and courts won't intervene, and this is where we are. Now, I want to share with you Donald Trump, who's already bored of this war, right? This is a guy who was dancing and partying at his, well, I don't know if he parties, but dancing and being praised and having dinner at his private social club in Palm Beach, Florida. At the same time, he is approving what would begin an illegal war that is spiraling out of control. More on that soon, right? Something that he did not plan for. It's illegal. He's lied about the rationale. He's lied, or his administration lies and says it is or it isn't war. They are not engaging in surgical strikes. They're now backing up and saying they would not have intentionally bombed a girls' school. How about recklessly? How about using really old fucking maps because you don't give a shit? How about saying you're not going to follow the rules of engagement? How about Hegseth, who has justified war crimes before? This is who these people are. And this is what they are doing. They have no exit strategy. They have no real objectives. And Donald Trump doesn't see any of us as human. And you can see this because he is at a press conference yesterday. And he turns away to discuss the draperies in the White House. Let me play this for you.
Do it right there. In fact, it looks so nice, I think I'll save money on the doors because it can't get more beautiful than that. I picked those drapes in my first term. I always like gold, but I think we can save a lot of money. I just saved curtains. But
I just saved curtains. I'd rather have you save children. I'd rather have you release the full Epstein files. I mean, I gotta say, he's giving Marie Antoinette a run for her money. What the hell? Now, I am not a revolutionary, and I am not a violent person. And yet I can see why. They took out those guillotines in France. Please do not take out, or a guillotine, excuse me. Please do not be violent. Please don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. But this is a fucking absurd. This is our clown, our utter narcissist, who is talking about saving money on drapes while he has knocked down the East Wing. Let me just tell you something. And knocked down a country. And the Middle East is sort of, embassies are blowing. The embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the U.S. embassy was bombed. They're telling people to leave that country, right? I'll add other countries in a second. There are Americans stranded, trapped right now. Didn't think about this before, right? Didn't care. I want to tell you that Donald Trump is an imminent threat. Let me be clear. If a foreign country bombed the White House and knocked out the East Wing, that would be an act of war. Donald Trump destroyed a huge chunk of the White House and now is saying, oh, I'm saving money on drapes? What the fuck is wrong with this man? Now, I would like to hear a more articulate commentary on that from Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Let's play it.
On the ground tonight. But in terms of overall, for people who are sitting at home and watching and wondering what is happening here, is it clear to you, based on what we've heard from the administration, why the United States is at war with Iran right now?
Of course, it's not clear. I mean, this is incompetent and ham-handed leadership. They all have different reasons for attacking Iran. I guess what I think is that it's just so disgusting to listen to the president of the United States be waxing and waning poetically about the drapes that he's buying. Well, there are 6 Americans who are dead. There are 6 American families who are about to bury their children because of a war of choice that no one in this country wanted, an illegal war.
6 Americans. He doesn't care. Oh, there will be casualties. This is who he is. Now, let me tell you right now that the United States is urging Americans who are abroad in certain Middle Eastern countries to leave. Explain to me how you leave. I have friends and family in several of these countries. So the problem is, of course, some of the airports have been bombed. It's very hard to get a flight out, right? And so the U.S. State Department, thank you, Marco, is telling non-emergency personnel to leave. And family members, 6 countries: Jordan, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. Okay. In addition, right, this is the State Department is telling people to leave, to evacuate. But that's personnel. What about just civilians? So if you are in the Middle East, the State Department is saying to leave 16 different countries and territories. And this is Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, UAE, and Yemen. How the hell are people supposed to get out of those countries? Yeah, there's a phone number for the State Department. How many Americans do you think are right now traveling abroad or living abroad in the Middle East right now? How many do you think? Right now, according to the BBC, there are between 500,000 and 1 million US nationals living in the Middle East. I don't know how you evacuate that many people. Where was the care and concern for Americans? Not to mention, as I have led with yesterday, the 175 people, including girls at this girls' school and teachers and so on, who were murdered through this illegal strike. Okay. Now let's listen to some further BS from the Republicans supporting the war. And let me just be clear. When I say Republicans, I mean the electeds who are supporting Donald Trump in this. I want to be clear, this is a hugely unpopular war. Apparently, the manosphere and a lot of the folks, MAGA folks, who supported Trump because they believed he would not get into a war in the Middle East, people who supported Tulsi Gabbard, have we heard from her? Who was selling T-shirts that said no war with Iran? They are furious. They are not getting in line. Some are. So here's the propaganda. Here's a little propaganda on CNN. This is, let's listen to this and we'll talk on the other side.
No one is saying Iran has been doing good things. I mean, the Iranian leadership. But
Well,
if
there's actually
this
quite
is
a few
about
Democrats and folks who are defending the Ayatollah's right to continue to rule and defending his existence. So I think
who is
in fairness,
defending the Ayatollah?
Well, let's see. We've had Elizabeth Warren's former campaign manager out there literally chanting "Death to America" on stage yesterday.
I don't know who that is, but Elizabeth Warren is not defending the Ayatollah. But the reason
We've got
I ask
Ilhan
you,
Omar and Rashida Tlaib who are saying that this is wrong. Actually, the New York Times publishing an obituary describing me as an avuncular cleric.
I think that was the Washington Post. But again, that's not a lawmaker. That's not a Democrat who is saying that this is what they did. But the reason I ask why this is happening is because we hear a bunch of different reasons from the administration. It doesn't seem like there's anyone settled on one reason. I mean, you just said regime change. Secretary Heggs had said this morning it's not a regime change war.
I think the reason you're hearing so many varied reasons is the varied threats this regime presents.
This guy gets on television with Caitlin Collins on CNN and tries to claim that Democratic electeds are supporting the Ayatollah, and saying he, backing that regime. Turns out it's not true, right? Complete lies. Saying you are against this war is not saying you are for Ayatollah Khamenei and his ways. For example, I am pro-American. I am an American pro-America. I don't support Donald Trump, right? That's an example, pretty much. I would not want a foreign country to drop bombs on America for regime change here. Sorry. Okay. And even Kristi Noem, who is presiding over the building of concentration camps, internment camps in the United States, who is covering up the murder of U.S. citizens, including Alex Preddy and Renee Nicole Good, and on. Those people, I don't support them, right? I don't support their policies, but I would not want our country I wouldn't want them killed. And airstrikes against our country. I mean, this is pretty simple stuff that these folks think they can just brazen through. Now, I got a couple more things for you today. Hillary Clinton, as you know, testified last week before the House, I think it's a House Oversight Committee that is investigating the Epstein files. And they released her, and so did her husband, Bill Clinton, former president. And they have released the videos of this. And I just want to show you one clip where Hillary makes clear that Donald Trump needs to come before this committee, as does Howard Lutnick and numerous others who are part of the Trump apparatus and elsewhere who are named in the files and accused. Let's play that.
Finally, do you think that Donald Trump should be deposed by this committee?
Absolutely. You know, I was a lawyer, and as a lawyer, you would look for pattern and practice. If you were deposing a witness in a case that you were trying, if you were in court, what did you know about this person? What you knew could influence how you questioned that person, how you tried the case. Donald Trump has been held civilly liable for sexual assault by a jury of his peers. 9 members of a jury found him liable in the sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll. That is behavior. That fits a pattern if one were looking for a pattern. He has also been convicted on 34 felony counts for attempting to hide his relationship with an escort and then to commit business fraud to prevent it from becoming public in the 2016 campaign, which was ultimately election interference. So if I were running the committee or I were involved in this investigation, I would be looking for people who maybe had some prior conduct that might be relevant to either money or crimes. And yes, I think that it would be in keeping with the scope of the investigation of this committee to set up a deposition with President Trump. I know he's been deposed many, many, many times. He's taken the Fifth Amendment many, many hundreds of times. So I'm not saying you're going to get a lot of information. But given what's in the files and given past and prior conduct, he would be on my witness list.
Holy hell. That was good. That is how someone who is well trained in law, who thinks clearly and logically, speaks. She could have been our president, but nah. No. Donald Trump, who, as she noted, cheated to win. That's what the 34 felony count conviction was, right? That was considered business records falsification, the felony, 34 counts of it, related to falsifying his business records to make it look like Donald Trump was, and this involved Michael Cohen, that he had these legitimate business expenses when in fact he was pretending to pay his lawyer for legal services when it was just reimbursement for paying off Stephanie Clifford, also known as Stormy Daniels, so that she wouldn't spill the story of how she'd had a sexual affair with Donald Trump. They didn't want it to spill right before the 2016 election. It is those 34 felony counts, it is that behavior that is one of the biggest reasons if this had come out. Plus there's Comey, we can say a bunch of stuff, plus Russian interference, which is a fact, even though Mueller could not find enough evidence of coordination. But we know how close the 2016 election was. Hillary won the popular vote. We know that if this had come out at that time, or the Epstein information had been out before this time, Hillary would have won. But it's part of a bigger system here. Now, one last thing before we go. And one treat. I've promised you Tank, our tortoise mascot, and I'm going to show you a Tank video. It's going to be great. Before that, I want to let you know that I'm going to update you tomorrow. There were 2 Supreme Court decisions last night after hours where the Supreme Court used its so-called emergency docket. It's not an emergency, but instead of hearing the full merits on something that really affects our lives, they decided to halt certain cases or support, in one instance, laws that were designed that would have helped people. So we will talk about this. This includes the Supreme Court blocking a law. So there was a law in California that was designed to protect kids, trans kids in high school, from being outed by the teachers to their parents. There might be a trans kid who doesn't want to be called, like, let's say my name is Jennifer and I want to be called Jared at school. And if that's what a kid wants to do, there could be a real issue with their parents harming them if they wanted to do that. And there was a law saying teachers couldn't disclose it. I'm keeping it pretty simple. I don't know all the details of the law. Well, that law has been blocked from going into effect. Okay, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Plus today we are, if it's not already happening now, Kristi Noem will be testifying about the Department of Homeland Security. So we will have some clips for you tomorrow, Wednesday morning. Okay, guys? And so with this, let me share with you our beloved Tank, the tortoise. We need a little prism. We need some mental health right now. Here he is, right? Here is Tank. And you can see playing ball, rolling that ball along. Look how healthy he looks. He looks fantastic, right? Okay, let me just show you that one more time, our beautiful Tank. And let's watch that. Okay, Tank, here you go. Here you go. Yes. Okay, and with that, my friends, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, the fabulous mods, Jason, Deb, and AJ. I don't thank you enough, but you make this show happen. And thank you to the whole Prism community. We are Prism mates, not prison mates. We are here together to support all kinds of health, our physical health, our relational health, our intellectual health, our spiritual health, and our mental health. I hope you got a little piece of that today. Thanks, guys.
Hello, Prism mates. It's the Gen Taub Show, where welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Gen Taub Show.